This story is entitled The Disappearance of Dr. Ted Curruthers, a Harley Street psychiatrist, by Eleanor Berry, www.eleanorberry.net. And it starts this way. A gentleman whom I will refer to as Dr. Curruthers was a Harley Street psychiatrist. He was, and still is, an unbelievably attractive man. I will not describe his appearance, nor indeed will I reveal the number of the building in which his Harley Street consulting rooms were to be found. I had been seeing him since September 1995, when my father had fainted in the south of France. I thought he had died and was absolutely terrified beyond belief. After that, I suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. At the time of the incident I am about to describe, the balance of my mind was disturbed once more. It was November 2017. I had just lost two brothers as well as my beloved Peachy, and Dr. Curruthers was instrumental in talking me through my losses, in particular the loss of Peachy. He struck me as being the best psychiatrist ever. I had been seeing Dr. Curruthers every Tuesday afternoon from 4 o'clock till 5 o'clock. At that time, unbeknown to me, Dr. Curruthers had had a lot of trouble with his nerves and had disappeared for 2 months. It was even alleged by some members of his staff that he had retired completely. I went to his Harley Street consulting rooms in time for my 4 o'clock appointment. The time was 3:45. It was a dark, overcast and depressing day. I rang the bell and was let in. I saw a dark-haired woman who was sitting behind the reception desk. The door leading to Dr. Curruthers' consulting room was locked. I approached the woman sitting behind the reception desk. "Where is Dr. Curruthers?" I asked. The woman, who was shabbily dressed and whose face and nails were unpainted, shrugged her shoulders. "I know nothing," she said casually. She spoke with a heavy Italian accent. I was feeling particularly traumatized by Peachy's death that bleak November afternoon, and I confessed that I completely lost it and had no idea what I was saying. I said, "You may not realize this, but I am a close personal friend of the Prime Minister's, and as such, I have the authority to drop a hydrogen bomb on Rome. The fallout will spread all over Italy and will even reach Sicily. All your friends and relatives will be annihilated. If you cooperate with me and tell me where Dr. Curruthers is, no harm will come to you. If you do not cooperate, I will instruct my chauffeur to drive me to Whitehall, where I will press the appropriate buttons." There was a silence, after which the woman said, "Non capisco." I had no idea at the time that non capisco was the Italian for "I don't understand." I thought she had said San Francisco. "What the hell is he doing in San Francisco?" I asked, my voice raised in anger. "I have an appointment to see him here at 4 o'clock this afternoon." An English-speaking receptionist joined the Italian woman behind the desk. She had heard my words. Doctors, dentists, and medical secretaries had gathered on the stairs, hoping to witness a scene. "If you don't leave now, I'll call the police," said the English-speaking receptionist. "If you do that, they will arrest you for wasting their time." "Where the hell's Dr. Curruthers?" I swept some diaries and other things off the reception desk. "I think he's retired from medicine altogether," she said. "What the hell do you mean?" I replied, adding, "If you refuse to cooperate with me, I will go to your house and I will seduce your husband." I had completely lost it. I was devastated but unbelieving. the thought crossed my mind that I would never see Dr. Curruthers again. The English receptionist continued to ask me to leave. Each time I refused. She called the police. A policeman, accompanied by a bloody Alsatian dog, was admitted to the premises. What seems to be the problem? I understand you were threatening to drop a hydrogen bomb on Rome. You're a bit short of a load, aren't you? Said the policeman. Absolute bollocks. One of my psychiatrists has gone missing, I said. Oi, how many have you got? I was ushered into the back of a panda car and handcuffed. There was another policeman in the car. He was in the driver's seat. I refuse to be treated like a common criminal, I said. I am a distinguished woman of letters with a myriad of published books behind me. When I am dead, my face will appear on the banknotes and my profile will be engraved on the coins. Sorry, madam, you've caused a disturbance as well as a breach of the peace, and we're slinging you down the neck. Well, if nobody ever broke the law, the police wouldn't be able to earn a living, would they? Besides, I'm far too important to be slung down necks, I said. I was taken to a police station. There were not enough cells, so I was left with the desk sergeant. I talked to him at length about Robert Maxwell's relationship with his father. I don't know why I did this. I was screwed up. It had dawned on me at last that Dr. Curruthers might indeed have retired from medicine altogether, and that I wouldn't see him ever again. The desk sergeant was very bad-tempered. I don't want to hear about that crook's relationship with his bleeding dad, he shouted. He was not a crook. Indeed, he most certainly was not. According to his widow, he wept during the sex act. There was a long silence. I'll have you know that I keep a bust of Sir Winston Churchill in my flat, I said eventually. So what? Shouted the desk sergeant. I had nervous, hysterical giggles. He said I had bored him to death and that I could go home. I still had no idea where Dr. Curruthers was. Because he was out of my reach, I felt I was in love with him. I rang his secretary up and left a message. She rang me back and said her boss was indisposed. That was all she was prepared to say. Is he seriously ill? I asked her hysterically. Well, he is and he isn't, she replied. I am not going to account for my words to her, other than to say that they were extremely lewd and offensive. She hung up on me. I rang her up several times every day thereafter. She spoke to me in a tinny, disinterested tone of voice and reduced me to tears. I left her a message saying no one reduces Eleanor Berry to tears without getting their comeuppance. In the end, I gave up. I avoided contact with Dr. Curruthers, his secretary, altogether, and I hired a private detective. Within about a week's time, the private detective found Dr. Curruthers in a loony bin somewhere in Scotland. He was lying on a leather-studded couch, releasing his demons onto yet another psychiatrist who had an incomprehensible Scottish accent and who asked the private detective to leave the room. The private detective did not do so, however. He ignored the Scottish psychiatrist and approached Dr. Curruthers. He asked him whether he had a patient called Eleanor Berry. Yes, said Dr. Curruthers, who was still lying supine on the leather-studded couch. Well, you'd better ring her straight away, said the private detective. She's been arrested for violent and threatening behaviour towards members of your staff in your Harley Street consulting rooms. Dr. Curruthers rang me up shortly after the private detective's visit to Scotland. He told me roughly what his problems were. They concerned the behaviour of his wife. He returned to London within a few weeks, and he sees me in my flat every Tuesday. He said that he could no longer use his Harley Street consulting rooms for some reason, and that he would be seeing his patients in their own homes thereafter. Our conversations are light-hearted, raunchy, and very familiar. I asked him when his first sexual experience had been, what his relationship with his mother had been like, and whether he had ever been buggered at Eton. I also cross-examined him in depth about his sex life. All his answers were remarkably forthcoming. It seems as if he gets a kick from answering my questions. On one occasion, he asked me whether I had had sexual relations with the late Robert Maxwell. I will only answer that question if you allow me to suck your cock, I replied. I have been sworn to secrecy, and I am not allowed to discuss the situation with Dr. Curruthers and his wife, other than to say that she is a pain in the butt, apparently. All I know is that her husband has been suspended by the GMC, General Medical Council, but I have no idea why. He is such a lovely man. I'm sure he is innocent of any wrongdoing. I love him to pieces. Natalie Klein employed a maid in her Westminster flat called May. That was her flat in London. After Curruthers' relationship with her had become physical, they began to use the floor of the living room. May slept in a double bedroom and occupied one of the beds. The other bed was empty. May also had a flat at the other end of the building. Things did not go well, however. Curruthers was profoundly embarrassed whenever he knocked over the urn containing Charlie's ashes. So Natalie insisted that they occupy the single bed in May's room. She said, "There is something I have to suggest to you, May. A favor, in fact," she said. "Oh, yes. Are you aware of the fact that Dr. Curruthers visits this flat every Tuesday afternoon?" "Who?" "Dr. Curruthers, of course, the psychiatrist." "What about him?" "Well, I don't quite know how to put this to you. However, the relationship between him and me has now become physical." "Oh, indeed? What do you mean exactly?" "Jesus, May, do I have to spell it out to you?" "I'm not quite sure what you're referring to," said May. "I don't want to use ribald language, May, but it looks as if I'm going to have to. Yes, he fucks me, so I will need to use the second bed in your room, and you will have to go to your flat at the other end of the building." "Oh, is that all?" "Yes. It will also be necessary for you to unlock the door of your room so that Dr. Curruthers and I can get in. Are you happy with this arrangement?" asked Natalie. "Yes," said May. "Good. Dr. Curruthers is coming tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Curruthers arrived as arranged the following afternoon. "Hello, sexy," said Natalie. She advanced towards May's room, but the door was locked. She was incandescent with rage and took the lift to the other side of the building. She unlocked the door. May was wallowing in a hot bath. "Where the hell is the key?" shouted Natalie. "What key?" said May. "Come on, May. I told you Dr. Curruthers was coming. I need to fuck." May seemed incapable of understanding Natalie's instructions. The lovers used a car which Curruthers had borrowed from a friend. they used the basement of the car park in Cavendish Square. Incidentally, Curruthers, the psychiatrist, is so beautiful that Natalie actually pays him for his services. She gives him £250 a week. Natalie was having a conversation with her elder sister Marigold in a crowded restaurant in London. Natalie talked a lot to her sister Marigold and said, "All I know is that her husband has been suspended by the GMC, General Medical Council, but I have no idea why. He is such a lovely man. I'm sure he is innocent of any wrongdoing. I love him to pieces." Natalie, who had always been an exhibitionist, was confessing to her elder sister that she had been paying £250 a week to her psychiatrist in return for sex. "Don't you think that it's awfully unladylike to pay your psychiatrist to fuck you?" asked the elder sister. "On the contrary, I think it's most unladylike to use filthy, disgusting language like that in a public place," said Natalie. There was a silence. "I can understand when a man picks up a woman for sex, but I certainly can't understand it when it's the other way round." "Oh, come on, Marigold. This is 2019, not 1930, said Natalie, her voice raised.